At 68, Sandra Walker was told she had a tumor growing in her womb. The doctors prepared her for the worst. They said they had seen this before. They were sure it was cancer. But what they found inside her body wasn't what anyone expected. It wasn't a tumor. They were wrong. After 43 years of waiting, Sandra was pregnant with twins. Listen to this brief backstory. Sandra had lived in Missouri her whole life. Small town, quiet life. She got married young, 25 years old. Robert was a kind man, a pastor. They both wanted children, desperately. The first pregnancy came a year later, but it ended in a miscarriage. Then another, and another. Doctors tried everything. Sandra changed her diet, took medications. They prayed. They waited. And then a stillbirth. A baby girl, born without breath. At 38, the doctor sat her down and told her the words she never forgot. Your womb can't carry life anymore. I'm sorry. Sandra didn't scream. She didn't cry that day. But every Mother's Day after that, she cried. She smiled at other people's baby showers. She made casseroles and bought gifts. But every time, something inside her broke again. Even so, she never turned bitter. She served in church. She sang in the choir. And every night before bed, she said one short prayer. Lord, if it's not too late, remember me. Life moved on. Robert passed away at 66. And at 68, Sandra thought her body was simply aging. She was tired all the time. Her back ached. Her belly felt tight. She didn't think much of it at first. But when she started bleeding and couldn't keep food down, she went to the clinic. The scans came back, and the doctors didn't waste time. They said there was a large mass inside her uterus. Likely a tumor, one said. Another mentioned the word cancer. She was told to prepare for emergency surgery. But Sandra didn't feel afraid. She didn't know why, but deep inside, she felt something else. Something that didn't make sense. She felt life. The night before her surgery, a younger doctor reviewed her scan. He tilted his head, took a closer look. Then he asked for a different machine, one with better sound. He placed the probe on Sandra's belly and paused. He adjusted the volume, listened again. Then his hand began to shake. He turned to the nurse. I think I hear a heartbeat. Then, wait, I hear two. The surgery was canceled. Sandra was rushed for further tests. More scans. More ears listening. And all of them heard the same thing. Two tiny heartbeats. There was no tumor. Sandra Walker was pregnant. With twins. At 68 years old. After 43 years of silence. No one had an explanation. But Sandra didn't ask for one. She just whispered, "Thank you, Jesus." News spread like wildfire. Missouri grandmother pregnant with twins. Some called it a miracle. Others called it fake. She was interviewed by TV stations. Bloggers said it was a hoax. Doctors from other states doubted the scans. Social media was brutal. She's too old. This can't be real. Someone is staging this. But Sandra stayed calm. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She just kept praying and preparing. When someone asked her if she was scared, she smiled and said, "I've waited 43 years for this moment. No negativity can steal my joy now." At 34 weeks, the doctors decided it was time. A special team was brought in. No one knew what to expect. Her age, her blood pressure, the baby's size. It was risky. Sandra was quiet as they wheeled her into the operating room. She held a small cross in her hand and closed her eyes. The first cry came 6 minutes later. Then another. Two tiny babies. A boy and a girl. Isaac and Joy. They were born healthy. Breathing. Moving. Beautiful. The room went quiet for a moment. Then someone began to clap. Tears rolled down the eyes of nurses who'd seen everything except this. The news changed overnight. Outrage turned to wonder. The same people who doubted her now praised her strength. Donations came from across the country. A women's group gifted her a new home. Her story was shared in churches, hospitals, even schools. Doctors still couldn't explain it. Her womb had been considered inactive. No fertility treatment. No IVF. Nothing. But Sandra wasn't interested in medical debates. She was busy rocking her babies to sleep, feeding them, singing lullabies. "I don't need to understand it," she said. "I just need to be their mother." Someone once asked Sandra what lesson she would want the world to learn from her story. She said, "Don't give up. If it's meant to happen, no time, no doctor, no diagnosis can stop it. Miracles don't run on our clocks." Now 70, She spends her mornings walking the babies in their stroller. Neighbors often wave and stop to play with them. Sometimes she catches strangers just staring, not in judgment, but in amazement. She doesn't mind. She knows what it took to get here. Hope doesn't expire. It doesn't age. And sometimes it waits. For 43 years. But when it finally arrives, it comes with tiny fingers, tiny cries, and 2 little lives that remind us. Nothing is too hard for the one who gives life. At 69, most women are preparing for retirement. Quiet days. Grandchildren. Rest. But Rebecca? She was in labor, with triplets. Doctors didn't know what to say. Nurses kept whispering. Some stood there just watching. But none of them knew what this woman had been through to get here. Rebecca got married at 29. She and her husband were full of hope. They thought children would come quickly. 1 year passed. Then 2. Then 5. Friends had baby showers. She was always invited, never celebrated. Her name became a prayer point. May God remember Sister Rebecca. It started as sympathy, but slowly, people stopped hiding their thoughts and started mocking her. She heard it all. And it hurt. Especially when the whispers came from people she once called family. She tried IVF 3 times. It drained her savings. Each time, she walked into the hospital with hope and came out empty. They suggested adoption. She almost agreed. But something deep in her kept saying, wait. So she did. For 40 years. One day, while in church, she sat at the back, trying not to feel anything, until one old woman approached her after the prayers. She looked tired, fragile, but her words were clear. Prepare for triple laughter, she said. Rebecca laughed. What else could she do? She hadn't seen her period in decades. Her hair was gray. Her hands had wrinkles. But 1 month later, she noticed something strange. She was nauseous. Her body felt off. She took a test. Positive. She took another. Still positive. She sat on the bathroom floor, holding the strip, shaking. At the hospital, the first scan shocked even the doctor. 3 heartbeats. Are you sure this is your result? He asked. How old did you say you are again? She told him, I'm 69. He blinked. They called it a geriatric pregnancy. High risk. Complicated. Dangerous. Her legs swelled. Her blood pressure was unpredictable. At 5 months, she fainted in her kitchen. They begged her to consider ending the pregnancy. 1 baby would be hard enough. But 3? Each time they brought it up, she simply said, these ones are mine. I'm not letting go. She spent the last 3 months on her back. Couldn't move much. Couldn't eat much. But her husband never left her side. He read to her, sang old church songs, rubbed her feet when the pain got bad. They named the babies before they arrived. Joy. Love turned to joy. The goodness of God. Nurses started calling her Mama Triplet. They smiled when they said it. But behind those smiles, they were worried. At 38 weeks, the baby stopped kicking. The room became tense. Doctors ordered an emergency C-section. Rebecca was awake when they wheeled her in. She held her husband's hand tightly. Just pray, she whispered. And then, she was out. First cry, a girl. Second cry, a boy. Third cry, another girl. All alive. All breathing. Tiny, but strong. The doctor stood back and said quietly, I've delivered babies for 27 years, but never like this. When Rebecca woke up, she didn't say anything. She just looked at the 3 tiny babies wrapped in white cloth, resting in warm cribs. She cried, then laughed, then cried again. God has remembered me, she said. At 69, her arms were full. Her home, once silent, now echoed with baby cries and laughter. She would wake up to feed them, even when her body begged for rest. She never complained. She had waited 40 years for this. The story spread, first in the hospital, then the town, then online. People called. Reporters came. Some cried. Others doubted. How can this be real? They asked. Rebecca just smiled. Whether they believe it or not, I carried them. I birthed them. They are mine. Now, 3 years have passed. Rebecca is 72. She doesn't walk as fast as she used to. Sometimes she forgets where she put her glasses. But she remembers every kick, every contraction, every tear. Her house is filled with drawings, toys, giggles, and sometimes chaos. And she wouldn't trade it for anything. Each time someone asks her for advice, she says the same thing. God may not come when you expect, but when he comes, it will be more than enough. There's a kind of waiting that breaks people, but there's also a kind of waiting that builds them. Rebecca waited 40 years. She cried. She prayed. She almost gave up. But in the end, her waiting wasn't wasted. It was preparing her. So if you're waiting, don't rush. Don't give up. Don't stop hoping. Because sometimes, joy doesn't just come. It comes in threes. She was 75 years old. No one expected her to be pregnant, not even her. But somewhere over the Atlantic, in a cramped airplane seat, Marvis screamed, and 2 newborn cries followed. A boy and a girl. After 5 decades of waiting, she became a mother in the sky. Alvin and Marvis got married young. They were full of faith, full of plans, and full of hope. The only thing missing, year after year, was a child. They laughed through it at first, until the laughter turned to questions. Then silence. Then prayers. Doctors gave them answers they didn't want to hear. Tests, scans, treatments, nothing changed. Family pressure came. So did pity. At some point, Marvis stopped attending baby showers. She just couldn't do it anymore. But through all of it, they never stopped believing. Not completely. When Marvis turned 60, she told Alvin she was done trying. By 70, she was already postmenopausal. They gave away the baby clothes they had bought years ago. And when they turned 75, they booked a trip to the United States. Not because they were expecting anything. They just wanted one last adventure. It started with a fainting spell, then nausea. At first, they laughed. It's just old age, she said. But a doctor checked, and checked again, and then told her, you're pregnant, with twins. She sat there frozen, not from fear, from wonder. After all this time now, 9 months later, they were back on a plane, heading to the US again. This time, for delivery. But midway through the flight, something changed. Marvis clutched her stomach. Then came the pain, the screaming, the urgency. And somewhere above the clouds, she gave birth. No hospital, no doctors, just a nurse on board, her husband by her side, and 2 tiny lives that refused to wait. When the flight landed, there were reporters waiting. Headlines flew. 75-year-old gives birth midair. Some were shocked. Some questioned it. But Alvin and Marvis didn't care. They weren't looking for attention. They had already received what they had been waiting for their entire lives. They named the twins Hope and Promise. Because hope kept them going, and promise kept them believing. Not everything happens when you want it. But sometimes, it still happens, just when you've stopped expecting it. If you've been waiting for something, healing, a child, a dream, don't give up just yet. You never know when your own story will take flight. Do you believe in miracles? Let us know in the comments. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who still believes. She was 75 years old. She wasn't rushing to catch a flight for an emergency. She wasn't running from anything. She was going on vacation with her husband. Then, somewhere over the Atlantic, in a packed airplane, Clara went into labor. By the time the plane landed, she was holding 2 newborns, a boy and a girl. She had waited over 50 years to be called Mama, and it finally happened, 30,000 feet in the air. This is the real story of Johnson and Clara. And what can happen when faith doesn't quit? They met when they were young. Johnson was the quiet, gentle type. Clara? Soft-spoken but strong. They got married in their early 20s and started dreaming of a full house. They had it all planned out. 2 sons, 1 daughter. A house with a big yard. They even picked names. But year after year, nothing happened. At first, it wasn't a big deal. Maybe it's the stress, people said. Give it time, the doctors told them. And they did. For years. Clara watched her friends announce pregnancies, plan baby showers, and raise children. She celebrated with them, at least on the outside. But each celebration made the silence in her own home a little louder. They tried everything. Herbs, supplements, church vigils, 5 rounds of IVF. Each one failed. The doctors were kind, but honest. We're sorry, but you should consider other options. But Johnson never blamed her. Not once. He held her hand through every test. And when people asked, why haven't you had kids yet? He simply said, we're waiting. At 40, they were still hopeful. At 50, they were still trying. By the time Clara turned 60, she stopped checking calendars. She stopped counting days. She told Johnson, let's just be happy. Just the 2 of us. And they did. They planted a garden. They traveled when they could. They poured love into their nieces and nephews. But deep down, a small corner of Clara's heart still whispered, what if? At 75, they made a decision. Not about children. They decided to take a trip to the United States. One final adventure together. No stress. No expectations. Just rest. But 2 weeks before the trip, something strange happened. Clara fainted. Right there in the living room. Johnson rushed her to the clinic. She thought maybe it was her blood pressure. Or stress. Or age. The doctor ran tests. Then stared at the screen for a long time. He called another nurse. Then another doctor. They whispered in the hallway. Clara started to worry. When the doctor came back in, he smiled nervously and said, "Ma'am, I don't know how to explain this, but you're pregnant." She laughed. She thought he was joking. But then he said the part that made her sit still. "You're not just pregnant. You're carrying twins." She looked at Johnson, and he was already crying. The next few months were surreal. She had no symptoms, no cravings, no morning sickness. The doctors monitored her closely. Every scan showed 2 healthy babies. Still, no one could explain how. They kept it quiet. Not because they were ashamed, but because it felt too holy to explain. Clara called them my 2 passengers. She said they came from heaven, and they'd arrive exactly when heaven wanted. 9 months later, it was time. They boarded the flight to the U.S. No special plan, just a regular commercial flight. Clara said she felt fine. They joked, took pictures, even shared snacks on the plane. But about halfway through the flight, Clara went quiet. She clutched Johnson's hand. "It's time," she whispered. At first, he thought she was joking again. Then came the contractions. Panic set in. A nurse on board rushed to help. The pilot called for an emergency landing, but there was no time. Clara was already pushing. No machines. No delivery room. Just faith. And the sound of 2 cries, one after the other. A baby boy. And a baby girl. Right there on the plane. No complications. No warning. Just a miracle midair. The plane erupted in applause. The crew wrapped the babies in blankets. The nurse cried. Johnson held both babies, and for the first time in his life, said, "These are my children." When the flight landed, it made headlines. 75-year-old woman gives birth mid-flight. Twin miracle at 35,000 feet. Everyone had a theory. But for Johnson and Clara, it was simple. God remembered them. They named the boy Isaac, and the girl Grace. Not because the names sounded nice, but because those names meant something. Isaac, laughter after years of pain. Grace, the gift they didn't earn. Today, Clara rocks her twins to sleep with wrinkled hands. And Johnson sings to them in a voice weathered by time. They are older than most first-time parents. They get tired quickly, but they don't complain. Because they waited, and they were not disappointed. So if you're watching this, and you've been waiting too long, for a child, for a healing, for a breakthrough, for something that everyone else seems to get so easily, just remember this: delay is not denial. And sometimes, God saves the loudest yes for last. Do you believe in miracles? Would you wait 50 years for a promise like Johnson and Clara did? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who still believes. It was a normal morning. Rosaline had been feeling tired for days. She thought it was just old age catching up with her. Maybe stress. Or a flu. But Robert insisted they go to the clinic. And that was when everything changed. Rosaline and Robert were young when they married. She was 23, he was 25. Theirs was the kind of love you read about. Simple, steady, real. They didn't have much, but they had dreams. Big ones. Rosaline would talk about their future children like she already knew them by name. Robert would nod and say, "Our house will be loud with laughter one day." But that day didn't come. Not after 1 year. Not after 2. Not after 10. They tried everything. Medical tests. Herbal mixtures. Prayers. They fasted. They sowed seeds. They cried. Rosaline was poked and prodded by doctors. One told her she had a small womb that can nurture a fetus. Another said she was completely fine. They didn't know what to believe anymore. Family members started asking questions. Some whispered behind their backs. Others said it out loud. What's the use of a woman who can't carry a child? The mockery weighed heavily on Rosaline, but to keep it cool, she learned to fake a smile so well, even Robert started to believe it. But at night, she'd cry into her pillow, and Robert would hold her, whispering, "As long as I have you, I'm not empty." By the time they turned 50, most people had stopped asking. They assumed the answer. Some encouraged adoption. Some suggested they move on and just enjoy the rest of their lives. But Rosaline couldn't shake the feeling that something was still coming. Not just anything. A child. Her child. She didn't try to convince anyone anymore. She just believed. Even when her body started showing signs of aging. Even when menopause came and went. Even when the mirror reminded her every morning that she wasn't young anymore. Still, she prayed. She read her Bible. And every time she saw the story of Sarah, she smiled. If God could do it for her, she'd say quietly, He can do it for me. It was a normal morning. Rosaline had been feeling tired for days. She thought it was just old age catching up with her. Maybe stress. Or a flu. But Robert insisted they go to the clinic. And that was when everything changed. The nurse looked confused. Then surprised. Then called in a doctor. And then, the impossible words came, "Ma, you're pregnant." Rosaline blinked. Robert laughed. Then stopped. Wait, what? The doctor repeated himself. Yes, pregnant. And not just one heartbeat. Two. The pregnancy wasn't easy. There were risks. Complications. Doctors warned of dangers. But Rosaline kept saying one thing. If this is God's doing, He will finish it. Month after month, she carried her babies. With swollen feet, aching joints, and a grateful heart, Robert would sing to her belly. Sometimes in tears. Sometimes in pure joy. The hospital was packed on the day of delivery. People came not just to visit, but to witness. The woman once called barren, now delivering twins. 2 healthy girls. Born on a Tuesday morning. Weighing just enough to cry loud and strong. Robert wept openly. Rosaline couldn't speak. She just kissed both girls, one by one, and said, "You took your time. But you came." Not every delay is a denial. Not every waiting season is wasted. Sometimes, the blessing takes time. A long time. But when it comes, it makes every tear worth it. Robert and Rosaline waited 44 years. And when God answered, He didn't send one child. He sent 2. So if you're still waiting, don't give up yet. Even if the whole world says it's too late. God's timing doesn't follow any clock. He is never early, never late, just right.